What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Shop Mini RC. I'm Ken, and today we're going to do a real quick video on SCX24 axles and CVDs. These are all kind of no-name brand parts, but I've had this happen with brand name parts, dare I say. Even higher quality stuff, I've seen this happen, especially when you mix and match axle housings or knuckles or the CVDs. So I just wanted to show you this little issue and how to fix it. So these axles, they were binding really bad, right? I had these knuckles in here, and these actually came from someone else. They asked me to figure out what was wrong with them. So let's see here. Let me get this keyed in here real quick. Why is it not keying? There we go. All right, so when the axle was all put together, you could just feel the binding in the steering. It was like super bindy. So I backed the screws out, still really bindy. And as soon as I backed out the screws all the way on this side, you could see it just kind of pop itself out, right? It just kind of like released the pressure. And so that tells me there's binding somewhere in the CVD. Now this set of axles did have dog bones, but I went ahead and pulled the CVD out and I looked at it and there was a bearing in there. Now some of these CVDs, depending on who you get them from or whatever, they have a little lip and the bearing does not seat all the way. Also, I've noticed that if you remove this inner bearing, you actually get a little bit better turn radius because it gives the ability to have a little bit of movement in there. So when this starts to turn, it's got a little bit of back and forth movement, and that's okay. That little bit of movement in there is not going to hurt anything because you've got double bearings on your knuckles, right? Bearing on the inside, bearing on the outside, and that's really where you need the support. With the CVD, you don't need that support right here. With a dog bone, you would want that support because otherwise it's going to flop around in there because a dog bone's not high tolerance. It doesn't have a super tight tolerance, and it's not a one piece, whereas this is kind of together as a one piece. So you don't need that inner bearing. So that was the first thing I did, is I removed that bearing, and that seemed to help quite a bit. I was able to kind of get them down in there, but there was still quite a bit of binding. Like you could just feel resistance on there, even with the screws basically backed out a ton. So I knew it wasn't that, and I knew it wasn't the knuckle itself, right? The play between the C-hub and the knuckle itself. There's a little bit of play in there, so it's not that. So there's definitely no binding there. And what it is it's these right here, the ends of the axle shafts. So when I pulled one axle shaft out, the other side's binding completely went away. So what that tells me is that these axle shafts at the end, they are hitting each other, and you can actually push it in there and I can feel it. So it's basically pushing off of each other in there. And when you try to put both knuckles on, it's pushing together and it's hitting the other axle shaft in the pinion or the ring. So all I did is I took a Dremel and I literally just Dremeled off like a tiny bit, right? And I test fit, and it was still a little bindy. Took off just a tiny bit more. Test fit, totally good. You can see I didn't really take off well, you didn't see them before, but the key portion, you can see there's like very little off, even compared to these guys. So that allowed it to sit nice and flush and with the knuckle on and tightened up. Let me go ahead and tighten this up and put the screws in there, and you can see I already did this side, and we're going to use a little bit of Loctite, just a tiny bit. Try not to get it on the bushing itself, but just on the end of the screw, because these screws do like to fall out. Okay. Remember, don't over tighten these. That's what the Loctite's for. Just get them snug enough. And you should be able to snug these guys down without it causing binding in your knuckles. If it is causing binding, you could always just back it off literally like 1/8 of a turn, maybe even less. Again, the Loctite's what's going to hold it for you. And look, now we are plenty of freedom of movement here. Still a little tight, but let's see. Oh, I can feel it. Yeah. So when I turn it, you can feel it like have resistance right there, and then you're good. And then resistance right there, and you're good. So what that means is it's still kind of, oh yeah, you can feel the shaft. But when I turn one, I bet you this is a little bit looser now. Yeah, just a little bit. Okay, so we're going to pull it back apart. We'll do this side now because we already took a little extra off this side. And we'll take a little bit more off and just keep doing that until it feels good, until it feels right. Again, you don't want to take off too much, because if you take off too much, you could have issues where it slips out of the the ring. Now, these are probably not going to happen because there's quite a bit. It's keying in there pretty deep. But, you know, it's always better to cut less, test, and then cut again if you need to. Yeah, I can already tell there's like less resistance even on the screw, so let me tighten this guy up a little too much. There we go. Oh yeah, look at that. Now it's just floppy. So what a difference just taking off a tiny bit in there makes. So if you're having binding and you can't seem to figure it out, maybe that's the problem. You always want to test for things along the way when you're putting it together. Make sure things move nice and smooth. Do the next step. Make sure that moves nice and smooth. Do the next step. Because if you get the whole thing together, like your whole rig, not just an axle, but we do it even in the axles, you get the whole thing together and then you're like, well, why is it binding? And then you got to take it all the way back apart just to try to find that one little spot. So when you're building, always kind of test things. Our bushing right here. Oh, you know what? This screw is too long. That's what's happening. This is the wrong screw. So that's something we've seen before too. People will put too long of screws into the knuckle here. And the screw will actually come through. I don't know if you can see, but it'll come through that little gap and it will sometimes rub on your dog bones or on your CVDs. So just another thing to check out and keep an eye on. Oh yeah, much better. Okay. Get our bearing in there. Yeah, we got just the tiniest bit of back and forth play. See that? That tiny bit? That means we got a little bit of room in there, which means we are not binding at all. So, just thought I'd show you guys. Hopefully this helps somebody out there. Like I said, this was somebody else's axle set, and they're like, I can't figure out what is going on. So they threw it over to me, and that's what the issue was. All right, guys, I hope you like, subscribe, share, and hit that notification bell. All those things you like to do for channels you want to support. It's just a click for you, but it means the world to me. Also, huge thanks to our channel members. This was actually a channel member, and that's why I said, you know what, if you want to, you can send it my way. I'll give it a look. So huge shout out to all the channel members. You can check that information out. There's a bunch of extra little perks and stuff like that, depending on the level you choose, but everybody gets to see videos early with no ads. So that's a bonus if you hate the ads. Your channel member, you get a couple days to view any videos before the ads go up on them. Anyway, guys, huge thanks again to everybody, subscribers and channel members. And if you want some swag, check out our swag. We got a bunch of swag too. Don't make a lot of money on it, like $1 to $2 each. It's just a buffer for when they change their pricing. It doesn't pull everything off the site. But really, it's just about supporting the channel with a hoodie or shirt or whatever. So we appreciate that. We also do contests sometimes where if you take a picture showing your support for the channel through your rig livery having stickers on it, or your shirt and or hoodie or anything else like that in a picture, you get extra entries into those giveaways. So anyway, awesome, guys. Have a great day. Get out there, build something awesome. Build a car, build a course, build a community, then smash it, crash it, and bash it, but don't break the expensive parts. Peace. Bonus for those who stuck around. SCX24 is notorious for binding in the wheels. You over tighten the wheel, and do I have any wheel nuts here? I guess I don't have any wheel nuts here. Anyway, you'll tighten it down, and then this hex hub actually is compressing. These little ears are compressing up against your bearing, and if you over tighten it, it can damage the bearing, and it just causes binding here. So one little thing that I like to do a lot, especially on these aftermarket ones, is I will grind down these little ears. So we've got our Dremel, you just take it down, you grind down, and you want to try to make sure you do it even and flat, which we did not do here. These are brass, so they're super soft, but you can also use sandpaper and just grind it, sand it down flat. But what you end up doing is you grind down those little ears, so you can see the difference here. Boom. Wow, we took off way too much. That's okay. We got thousands of these things. So you grind them down, and actually didn't do too bad here. And now look, it can sit further in. Okay. And if you need to shim out your wheel more, you put shims on the outside here. You can put like a washer or something on the outside, and that'll push your wheel out just a little bit if you were trying to do that. You don't want to use these ears as your shim. You want this hex hub to actually sit on the axle pin. So it drops down on there and it sits on the axle pin, and you should have the tiniest bit of back and forth play. When this is tight and you're squeezing this axle and pushing this hex hub up against that pin, you should have just the tiniest little bit of back and forth play there, a tiny bit. See, we're actually just about perfect, I think. I don't think we're hitting at all. Oh yeah, we're not hitting at all. So it's sitting on the axle pin, which is perfect. That way you can actually tighten down your nut, and it's not going to compress onto your bearing there. All right, so you can just see what a huge difference that is. Look at that. Huge difference in how far down it sits. It's like not even sitting on the axle pin when you have the hex hub like this. So just take it down just a little bit. And again, go slow. Don't do what we just did. Grind it a little slower. Test it. Grind it a little slower. Test it. And as soon as you feel movement in there, when you're tight and you're holding it, you're pushing it tight up against that pin, and you feel a little bit of back and forth movement, look at that. There's that tiniest bit. You're done. Stop. You're good to go. It's perfect, though. That worked out really well. We've done it a lot. So that's why. Anyway, guys, thanks again. Peace.